It's not the outside, it's actually the inside we're looking at in this episode of Airsoftology Reviews. So most reviews are big shooting tests and all that, but I'm gonna do something very different here. I'm gonna show you guys the install process. I'll come back at a later date and we'll do some shooting tests. In fact, if you wanna see how a Polarstar shoots with the, shy of the efficiency and all that bit, which I'll get into in a second, I'll definitely link over here my video from the original Fusion Engine install. But we're gonna be talking about the actual install of these new drop-in systems that have really been hot in the market the past couple of years. So my donor body here is a G&G PDW 15 CQB, which I thought was kind of one of the perfect little builds. It's lightweight, it's simple, it's easy, has this really small stock, which kind of does sometimes limit batteries, although this one is actually really big, so you can fit normal batteries in here, but it gives you that room, just enough room to put all the guts. So I'm gonna walk you through the install on this to show you some of the things you may wanna deal with if you wanna do this install yourself, rather than taking it to a pro shop. All right, so starting off, the first thing you gotta do is tear apart your gun. I know this can be kind of challenging for some people, but the good news is most of the parts that are gonna come out are not gonna go back in. You just need a handful of them to keep this beast alive. So first initial tear down, you're gonna disassemble the gun. You're gonna get that mech box out of the body. Now every gun will be different. In this case, it's a standard M4 platform, so it's the normal stuff. A few body pins, push a few through, hammer a couple out, some screws to take off the grip itself, and you should have most of the components out of the way so you can start getting to the core of the gun. Once you've finagled and wiggled that mech box out of the lower receiver on your version 2 mech box here, now it's time to get everything out of it. So handful of screws, you're gonna go take those out of the mech box and you're gonna go diving into the internal parts. Now pretty much inside, you're only gonna keep a few components. You're gonna keep the trigger itself, and you're actually gonna keep the spring guide, which I will tell you about in a second, why and how I messed up my first build on this one. I had to go back and redo it. So once you've got all the parts out, you've got all the gears out, you've taken the piston head, cylinder, all that good stuff, tappet plate, everything out, now you can drop in the engine. Now in this case, I have both. I have both the Jack and the F1 engine, and I'll tell you here at the end of the video the differences between those two systems. But I decided to put the F1 in here because it is a bit more efficient and it's the more premium of the two. I just wanted to kind of ink out a little more air efficiency for this build. So once you've got it dropped in, you have the electronics in there too. You do have a trigger board to install, and then a third piece, which is actually kind of the ECU, the control board, that lives outside of the gun, so that's something to consider as well. Once you have all the parts internally, which I said, it's just a few of those, you can put the trigger back in place and get this mech box back together. Now, I told you earlier I messed up, and I did. I kind of made a mistake when I was building this. I totally forgot to put the spring guide back in, and you're gonna go, well, why would you need a spring guide? If you've never done a build like that, you might be asking. If you have done a build with one of these, you're gonna know exactly the answer to this. Without the spring guide, you can't put the screw in that holds the stock back on. So definitely make sure you have that in there. So once I got the spring guide set, I actually used the stock screw to hold it in place until I get everything together. I put it all pieces and parts together, got it tested, make sure the trigger works in all 3 fire modes, and then started reassembling. Now, what's unique about this gun, because it is an ambi fire selector, so it works on both sides, there were a few extra components on this mech box externally, some gears that did require a little extra work that you're not gonna find on a normal standard M4 that doesn't have an ambi fire selector. All right, with all the guts in there and the air hose routed out the bottom, the wiring routed out the back where the original wiring went for the gun since it was rear wired, then you're good to go. Put it back in the low receiver and reassemble everything as you would. Now, when you get to the grip, you're gonna have a few different things here. What I do is I will take this little quick disconnect attachment off the bottom of the air hose here. That's gonna allow you to do a couple things. One, to route this hose down through the grip itself here, the motor grip, because the motor is now gone out of there. It's gonna be empty on the inside. And the second thing is actually get it through the end. Now, this is optional. You don't have to put this end plate back on the gun, the one that actually here, the motor grip plate. I personally do. I just kind of like the look of it, and it keeps the hose for me kind of in the right spot. Some people are actually against it. They like to have an extra place so it doesn't actually cause this hose to maybe get crimped. It's really personal preference, honestly, and I know there are some mods you can pick up to actually make it go flush, so the Quickness Connector comes right out of the bottom here. So once it's back together, you're gonna be routing that wire here in the back. Fortunately on this one, we have plenty of room for the wire that comes with it. Most of the AEGs are gonna have a big enough hole to get that small little plug through. So once you have this thing together, now it's programming time. And again, I've already covered this in a previous video. I'm not gonna kind of belabor it here. If you guys wanna watch that, it's the one I mentioned earlier. It's also in the description below, so you can check it out if you want to. Plus, there's a lot of great guides on the internet, including the guide that comes with the box. But what I wanted to show you here was that install. Now let's real quickly talk before we wrap this thing up about the differences between the F1 and the Jack, because they look very similar. In fact, on first impressions, you would think they're almost the same. But side by side, you can start to tell a few differences. The Jack is a lower cost solenoid, which actually keeps the cost of the unit down. It drops actually a sizable amount of money off there. So if you're more budget minded, you can get the Jack. Now, because of that solenoid, you're gonna have a little less air efficiency. And we're not talking like 50% of the shots of the F1, but there's a small difference between the two. So you're gonna kind of see that performance difference in air efficiency. Now, in shooting efficiency and this ability to actually put BBs down the barrel accurately and keep everything going, they're identical because the control unit, the trigger board, all of that is the same for both units. They're actually interchangeable. You're gonna be able to use those across the boat. So you're not sacrificing any functionality, merely just air efficiency. But like I said, I opted for the F1, a little bit more budget. You're gonna spend a few dollars more there, kind of move up to that mid-range in that price point, in that tier, and you're gonna be going for that extra air efficiency. And if you're looking at not getting those last 15, let's say, % of shots that you may not get with the Jack out of it, the Jack is actually a very good option. But no matter which one you choose, you're gonna get the same functionality and the same performance. But now that you guys have seen it, it really didn't take that long. Total install time for me, start to finish, was probably about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, but that was also including my big mess up where I had everything put together and went to go put that stock on and realized I didn't have the spring guide in there. So if you guys follow from my mistakes and learn from it, you're actually gonna probably get that down to about an hour and a half or even shorter for your build. All right, so this wasn't like a full review. It's really more of a review of how these things are installed and how not intimidating they are for the average user. For me, I would say this is on a scale from 1 to 10 for complexity, is probably around that 6.5 mark, at least for me. I've done a way more complex builds, especially with AEGs where you have to do a lot of crazy tuning. With this, because you're just taking those parts out and you're not having to replace those parts, it brings that complexity down. So if you guys are mechanically inclined, I would definitely say go ahead and do this, but I wanna know what your thoughts are. Have you put in a Jack, an F1, or another drop-in system in your gun before? How did you guys feel about the install? Was it a big challenge or was it pretty simple to you? Also, what are your thoughts on HPA? A lot of you guys out there use it and a lot of you don't. What are your feelings on HPA? I want to hear about all that down in the comment section below. Well, that's it for this review. And again, as always, thank you for hanging out here with me and being so cool in the comment section. If you guys haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you mash that subscribe button. Of course, like and share this video with all your friends across the internet. Until next time, go out and have some fun, play some airsoft, but no matter what you do, call your freaking hits.